One of the things I've hated most about being more interested in YouTube as a platform is the sort of slack people cut some of the old guard, the old standards of YouTube. And a lot of times you'll see, for a multitude of different reasons, certain YouTubers completely fall off a cliff with their personality, fall off a cliff with the quality of their content. And I see them all kind of falling off the same way with the same excuses. And one of the things that frustrates me is how some of these YouTubers suffer completely different fates. You compare guys like, say, Spoony, Noah Antweiler versus H3H3, Ethan Klein versus Boogie 2988. You see guys like Boogie continue to grow despite, in my opinion, kind of being a dirtbag. And that's a freaking extremely controversial opinion that I think that somebody who's universally considered one of the sweetest, nicest, most positive people on YouTube is actually a fucking dirtbag on the inside. I think that about Boogie. A slightly less controversial opinion that is rapidly becoming less controversial by the day is that Ethan Klein is a fucking dirtbag. And then you take a guy who completely crashed and burned and lost everything. You see three people who are extremely arrogant, extremely unstable, don't feel any kind of responsibility to their audience, except for maybe Boogie does. I mean, sometimes Boogie comes clean, but that's why we should start with Boogie, okay? Boogie is a guy who is constantly, somehow, I don't think it's really his choice to, but sometimes he ends up in really controversial positions. The first time I ever really knew anything about Boogie, besides the fact that he showed up in memes, was when he was on a panel about gaming toxicity with Anita Sarkeesian, and she just bullied him right there on stage, just talked mad shit about him when he was being super sweet to her. And the thing is, to this day, he's never really said a crossword about her and really kind of refused to talk about that. And he's had a lot of different run-ins with stuff like that, where he just won't say bad things about Philip DeFranco, despite Philip DeFranco being a scammer. He won't say anything bad about Anita Sarkeesian. You know, Boogie is a guy who clearly knows right from wrong. I think Boogie's actually probably a guy who's pretty obsessed with morality and doing the right thing, which is something that has probably garnered him a lot of fans in this very cynical YouTube world. However, Boogie has never taken a stand for anything where his own reputation was at risk. Ever. 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 The closest he's done that I've seen, and maybe there's more, I don't exactly follow this guy because I think his content sucks and I don't understand why anybody respects his opinion on fucking anything, was when he canceled his sponsorship with BetterHelp, which is a supremely exploitative, fucking evil scam. You know, taking advantage of the mentally ill is something fucking disgusting. And as a guy who's got at the very least severe depression, Boogie was at least able to do the right thing there, if only because he used BetterHelp and told his deepest, darkest secrets with no guarantee of confidentiality whatsoever to a scam, and realized, oh shit. And that's what he said when he was confronted was, if anybody finds out what I've told these people, holy shit, my life is over. The guy is selfish deep down, even though outwardly he's obsessed with being nice, being moral, being sweet. He wants the best for people, and he clearly wants the best for himself. Deep down, he doesn't really have those principles. He doesn't have those convictions. Deep down, he's really selfish. How do I know? I used to be a lot like him in that way. And in fact, moving on, that's something I'm going to say about the other two guys. So Spoony, severely depressed, clearly bipolar, really vulnerable emotionally and struggles socially, but is incredibly smart, very, very funny, and extremely perceptive. Put out some of my favorite content ever in that sort of comedy review genre. Far better than Nostalgia Critic. Far more talented than James Rolfe. Way better. And yet, he threw it all away because deep down, even though he's a guy who professes, especially on his Twitter before he got banned, to be so obsessed with what's morally right politically. You know, very much like me. Very obsessed with what's right, what's good, what's best for people. and very angry when he sees people be self-destructive, people being exploitative, and yet, what does he do? Takes a fuckload of money from his Patreon, stops producing content for years, belittles, insults, and lashes out at his fans, the only people who give a shit about him, and, complains his depression's getting worse, his health is getting worse, and he's miserable. But the thing is, a lot of that is not the fault of Donald Trump's election or whatever's going on in his family or whatever's going on with his personal health. A lot of it is him not actually practicing what he preaches. And then you take a guy like Ethan Klein, who was a meme legend, just a total legend. And I mean that in the Gokunara legend sense, if you get that reference. And the guy is clearly, I've watched a couple episodes of his podcast. It's the most boring, lazy, bitter, cynical, uninteresting garbage laden with so many ads that some people think he's making a fucking mint on every single episode, which he does more or less twice a week. And he doesn't even try. He made an ass of himself interviewing Bill Burr. He's made an ass of himself interviewing a lot of other people. Backstabbed the guy who made him famous, JonTron. He's just a fucking scumbag. A guy who's loves morally grandstanding, and yet you look at how he treats the people around him. Look at the gratitude he shows to the people who've helped him in the past. Look at how at any point that he's ever faced with somebody who's more popular than him or ever enters any kind of banter with him. This is a guy who throws out mad insults, talks nothing but trash, but just watch his physical body language. Anytime anyone even jokes with him, this is especially apparent in the Bill Burr podcast. He's just a snarky, interrupting, really fake person towards Bill Burr, and Bill Burr picks up on. He's never met Ethan Klein or watched any of his videos in his life. Just shows up because his agent probably scheduled him to be on the podcast, and he's immediately feels the resonance coming off of Ethan. Negative, insecure, bitter, and he notices Ethan's part of one of Ethan's way of communicating with his friends, let alone his enemies, is to talk shit, to be exceedingly rude and snarky and sarcastic. And then he does this to Bill Burr, and Bill Burr talks to comedians and talks to and about bad comedians all the time. And what is Ethan Klein? An exceedingly bad comedian. That's what he is. That's literally what Ethan Klein is. He's a bad comedian. Ethan Klein got popular by dressing up and doing goofball stunts and pranks. But if you sit down with Ethan Klein, no makeup, no goofy clothes, no editing, nothing, just him and a microphone, Ethan Klein has nothing. He's a talentless fucking hack. He's a piece of shit. And he's not just a piece of shit because he's talentless. He's a piece of shit because he's an exceptionally bad person. Deep down on the inside, Ethan Klein is a bad person. And what's his excuse been for his behavior? Same as the other two people. I'm depressed. I'm sad. I'm under a lot of pressure. Well, I used to be a guy just like that in my early 20s. I'm sad. I'm depressed. I'm under a lot of pressure. I have every excuse to be angry. I have every excuse to be bitter. I have every excuse to be extremely rude and cynical and fucking a drain on everyone else around me. I have every right to treat the people closest to me worse than I treat strangers that I don't like. And then wonder why everybody fucking hates me. Wonder why I feel miserable. And you know what the cure for such fucking degeneracy is? It's not beatings. Although maybe a few of these people might benefit from one. The cure is to be able to look in the mirror and realize you have no one to blame but yourself. No one. No one. And not only that, but you have to look yourself in the eyes and admit that you are what you hate. You have to be able to look at yourself and honestly say, I don't have an excuse. I chose to be this way, and I pretended that I wasn't this way. I pretended that I wasn't responsible. I pretended that everything was unfair. It's not my fault. None of these things is true. People like this need to understand and take it from me as a guy who had a shitty childhood, backstabbed by friends, fucking robbed and mistreated by people I cared about, abused by my parents, all this ugly shit, every classic excuse, every poor little old me, feel sorry for me, you know, I'm a victim, it's not my fault, it's okay, cut me some slack, all that shit. None of that helps these people, by the way. Cutting these people slack does not help them. Not only does it not help them, you don't have any responsibility to feel sorry for these people. Even if they're your closest friends, you can be supportive to them, but you should not feel sorry for them. You can be understanding of their plight, but at the same time, you do not have to, nor should you, absolve them of their personal responsibility for their own lives. And that's why whenever I see guys like Spoony, who I was a big fan of, guys like Boogie, who I find distasteful but I don't think are evil, and guys like Klein, who I think is a subhuman piece of dog shit. I don't know any of these people, and yet I know these people because of how much I can see of myself in them, how much I know the way they think, and how much I know the way they feel. And especially when you take these kinds of people and you introduce them to money, power, and especially in the case of Klein, yes men, surrounded by fucking yes men, you're not going to be held responsible. These are people where if you fucking, you know, these are like coworkers or employees of yours, where if you treat them like shit, they won't say anything to you. And not just because that you're their paycheck, but because maybe you had some sort of legitimate legend that they still look up to. Not only would they not, for their own good, not tell you that you're a dirtbag, they wouldn't tell you because they wouldn't even want to tell you. They wouldn't want to, you know, there's a saying that goes, don't meet your heroes. Well, there are people who can meet their heroes and see what their heroes are really like, and it doesn't change their opinion of them. Some people are just that vulnerable, that starstruck, or that submissive. I used to be like that. I used to let people walk all fucking over me, and it definitely contributed to my bitterness and my angst and all my emo fucking take some edge off that fucking table meme shit. I also used to think that being, letting people walk all over me was the way to get people to like me, in the same way that Klein most assuredly thinks that being a snarky, rude, cutting asshole is what people like about him. No, it was the fact that you put on 200 shirts and rode a lazy boy or whatever the fuck they call those things through Walmart. Because you would dress in drag, because you would make yourself look like an asshole, because like all your selfies used to be like, oh, your neck fat and shit. Yeah, I have that too. I used to be fat. And some of that skin does not bounce back, especially as you get older. Yeah, I know how it is, Ethan. But when you have the world's worst podcast and somehow you pull in 1 million views, and I'm just looking at you going, you're so uncharismatic, you're so unlikable, and you're so just devoid of talent, that you make Logan Paul look like Jesus Christ. Like, how the fuck? I mean, I can't even see what people see in Ethan because all the memes and shit that made him so big like 9 years ago are dated now. I don't find them funny. Maybe I would have found them funny if I was 9 years younger and seeing them when they were current, when they were hip and edgy. But now, the dude's a total has-been. And that doesn't mean anything coming from a guy like me, but it's true. And I can't stand to see this kind of shit. And at some point, especially as somebody who's pretty heavy into consumer advocacy, like I follow like tech guys. I don't know shit about tech. I follow like Luis Rossmann for the express purpose of him shitting on Apple and just being just absolutely disgusted that there is such a thing as an Apple fanboy when Apple products are fucking dog shit. This video, by the way, is being recorded on an iPhone that I did not personally buy. So I didn't have a choice in getting this. And I've had it for like 6 years. And I fucking hate it. It's got the planned obsolescence bug built into it. So it's slow as fuck compared to when I got it. It's slower than an iPhone 3, and I think this is an iPhone 6. And it sucks, and I hate it. But and that's why it's not hypocrisy. And when I see what like MacBooks and stuff, I'm like, yeah, get him, Luis. Fucking sue him, Luis. They're fucking, they're confiscating his stuff, saying that like, oh, he shipped in Apple batteries because he wants to fucking be able to repair people's MacBooks and shit, because Apple refuses to repair MacBooks that are more than like 3 years old. And they claim that he was counterfeiting shit just because he got them from a non-approved dealer or something, even though they're literally the actual factory batteries for Apple. He claimed they're counterfeit just because he got them in a way they didn't approve of. Shit like that. Like, I'm big into consumer advocacy. But what's equally frustrating and is somewhat hypocritical, and we'll close with this, is when I see people just lapping up dog shit and asking for seconds. Like, why? Who the fuck thinks the H3H3 podcast is anything other than a free-rolling clusterfuck, a dumpster fire on wheels? Why? What the fuck? It's like, why? Go watch the Joe Rogan Experience. Go watch like a podcast that isn't dog shit. Dude, there's 1,000,001 podcasts that are more funny, more interesting, and maybe they don't get celebrity guests or guests with like 8 million, subscribers, which is like, what are we asking for? Like what, Rice Gum or something? Like, people with 8 million subscribers are garbage, except for, PewDiePie and some Let's Players. What else does he have to offer? Nothing. Fucking nothing. And not only that, but Joe Rogan's got YouTubers on all the fucking time. He's had Philly DeFranco. He's had The Amazing Atheist. He's had Sargon. He's had at least half a dozen other guys that I don't even remember, because the guy puts on like 5 podcasts a fucking day. Like, why would you watch H3H3 except for you were loyal from like fucking what, like 2009 or something? Like, why? Like, why do you do that? Why do you waste your own fucking time? Why do you care? Why do you think that because you feel like you've grown up with Ethan, that you think he feels anything for you? He doesn't. He fucking doesn't. He's a piece of shit. He's a piece of shit. Anyway, thanks for watching.